You may have noticed something about the way people react to you that never quite seems to happen to everyone else. When you walk into a room, the atmosphere subtly shifts. Some people warm up to you almost instantly, as if they have known you longer than they actually have. Their posture relaxes, their voice softens, and within minutes they are sharing parts of their life story they normally keep guarded. At the same time, there are others who react very differently. They keep their distance, their tone stays cautious, and their eyes carry a kind of quiet discomfort that they cannot easily explain. They may not dislike you in any obvious way, but something about your presence makes them uneasy. Very few people feel neutral around you, and for a long time this dynamic can feel confusing. You might wonder if you said something wrong, if you gave the wrong impression, or if people simply misunderstood you. But the truth is often much simpler and much deeper at the same time. Some people respond strongly to you, not because of anything you intentionally did, but because of what your presence represents. Human beings are remarkably quick at reading emotional signals, even when they cannot explain what they are sensing. Within seconds of meeting someone, people subconsciously evaluate tone, posture, energy, and intention. Most interactions remain surface level because most people carry social masks designed to make life easier. Politeness replaces honesty. Small talk replaces truth. But when someone encounters a person who does not rely heavily on those masks, the reaction becomes stronger. Your presence tends to communicate clarity. Even if you say very little, people sense authenticity. For individuals who value honesty, this feels refreshing. They recognize something genuine and immediately feel safe. Their instincts tell them that you are not performing a role, not manipulating the conversation, and not hiding behind a carefully constructed personality. For them, that kind of presence feels rare, and it draws them closer. But the same authenticity can produce the opposite reaction in others. People who depend on appearances often feel unsettled when they encounter someone who seems comfortable being real. It creates a subtle tension they cannot quite name. It is not hostility, and it is not exactly fear. It is simply the discomfort that appears when clarity enters a room that has been operating in fog. This dynamic is not new, and it is not unique to modern life. Throughout Scripture, individuals called by God often triggered strong reactions simply by existing. Their presence carried a certain gravity because it reflected truth more than performance. Jesus himself produced this exact divide. Some people followed him with devotion and trust, while others kept their distance or rejected him entirely. The Gospel of John describes the tension clearly, noting that among the crowds, there was widespread whispering about him. Some said he was good, while others insisted he was deceiving the people. Even in that moment, neutrality was rare. The same pattern continues today in quieter, everyday ways. When a person carries sincerity, purpose, and calm confidence, people around them instinctively respond. Those who appreciate honesty move closer because it feels like relief from the exhausting game of social performance. Others feel the opposite pull. They retreat slightly, often without realizing why. The divide does not appear because you are trying to provoke reactions. In fact, many chosen individuals spend years trying to soften themselves in order to avoid this dynamic. They try to blend in more, speak less directly, or adjust their personality to make others comfortable. But the reactions still appear. Eventually, you begin to understand something important about this pattern. The responses you receive from people are rarely about superficial details. They are about alignment. Some people resonate with clarity because they are searching for it themselves. Others avoid it because it quietly challenges the identities they have built. This realization can be surprisingly freeing. You stop interpreting every reaction as personal rejection or approval. Instead, you begin to see that people are responding to what they perceive in your presence. And what they perceive often reflects their own inner state more than anything you have done. The person who values truth will recognize something familiar in you. The person who fears exposure will instinctively step away. Both reactions are natural. Both reactions reveal something. And both reactions explain why your life often includes a curious mix of strong connection and quiet distance. As confusing as this pattern may feel at times, it also carries a deeper meaning. When God places clarity within someone's character, it rarely goes unnoticed. Light has a way of making itself visible, even when it is not trying to attract attention. And wherever light appears, people respond. Some step toward it, others prefer to remain in the shadows. Neither reaction changes the purpose of the light itself. If you've ever wondered why certain people seem to connect with you almost immediately, the answer is often simpler than you might expect. It is not about charisma in the traditional sense, and it is not about trying to impress anyone. The connection usually happens because authenticity is something people recognize faster than they recognize almost anything else. In everyday life, most individuals move through social environments carefully managing how they appear. Conversations are filtered, opinions are softened, emotions are hidden behind polite smiles. It is not always dishonest, but it is often protective. People learn early that being fully transparent can sometimes lead to misunderstanding or rejection, so they adapt. They create a version of themselves that functions smoothly in social situations. It works, but it also creates a quiet distance between who they really are and the identity they show the world. When someone encounters a person who is not operating behind that kind of mask, the difference becomes obvious. Authenticity carries a certain calmness. It does not need to prove itself, and it does not strain to be accepted. It simply exists. For people who value honesty, this kind of presence feels unexpectedly safe. They sense that they do not have to perform around you. They do not have to measure every word or maintain a carefully managed image. Instead, they feel permission to relax into who they actually are. That sense of emotional safety is powerful, and it often explains why some people feel drawn to you very quickly. It is not because you are trying to lead them or influence them. It is because authenticity removes the invisible barriers that normally separate people from one another. Conversations become more genuine. Listening becomes more natural. The interaction carries a quiet depth that is difficult to manufacture artificially. Over time, those who appreciate sincerity begin to trust you more easily because they recognize consistency between your words, your actions, and your character. That alignment creates credibility without effort. People sense that what they see is what they get. In a world where many individuals feel pressure to perform or impress, encountering someone who appears comfortable with truth can feel refreshing. Scripture often speaks about this quality of character. Integrity is not described as something loud or dramatic. Instead, it is presented as a quiet strength that shapes how a person walks through life. Psalm 15 describes the person who may dwell in God's presence as someone who walks blamelessly and speaks truth from the heart. That description does not focus on outward success or recognition. It focuses on sincerity. Authenticity, in this sense, becomes more than a personality trait. It becomes a reflection of alignment between inner values and outward behavior. When a person carries that alignment, others begin to feel it, even if they cannot explain why. Some individuals who meet you may feel an immediate sense of relief. They may begin sharing personal experiences or struggles they normally keep hidden. This reaction can surprise you, especially if you do not feel particularly extraordinary. But the reason is often simple. Authenticity creates space where honesty can exist without fear of judgment. People who have spent years navigating environments built on appearances sometimes recognize that space immediately. They realize they can speak openly without needing to impress or defend themselves. The connection that forms in those moments often feels unusually strong because it is built on truth rather than performance. For people who are searching for growth, clarity, or meaning, Your presence may feel encouraging. They see someone who is not driven by the need to please everyone, and it reminds them that living honestly is possible. In subtle ways, your calm confidence may inspire them to examine their own lives. They may begin asking deeper questions about their goals, their values, or the direction they want their life to take. You do not necessarily instruct them to do this. The influence comes simply from observing someone who appears comfortable standing in their own identity. Authenticity has that effect. It invites reflection without demanding it. For individuals who are already seeking truth, this influence feels positive and empowering. They feel understood in ways they may not experience often in everyday conversations. Over time, these people become some of the most meaningful relationships in your life. The connection grows because it is rooted in mutual respect and shared values. You recognize sincerity in them, and they recognize sincerity in you. Neither side needs to maintain an illusion. That kind of relationship carries a stability that is difficult to replicate through superficial interaction. The bond forms quickly because authenticity accelerates trust. People instinctively move closer to what feels real. In a culture where so much communication happens through carefully edited images, curated messages, and controlled appearances, genuine presence stands out more than ever. Those who are tired of pretending notice it immediately. They see someone who appears grounded, someone who does not need to exaggerate their achievements or hide their imperfections. That honesty feels human and approachable, and in that moment, a simple but powerful connection begins to form. Over time, you may realize that the people who feel drawn to you share certain qualities. They tend to value sincerity, growth, and self-awareness. They are not looking for perfection. They are looking for truth. When they encounter it in another person, they recognize it almost instantly. This attraction is not based on popularity or status. It is based on alignment. People who appreciate honesty move toward those who embody it. And in many ways, this attraction reflects something deeper than personality. It reflects the spiritual principle that truth naturally gathers those who are ready to receive it. Authenticity does not need to chase connection. It creates it simply by existing. While authenticity draws certain people toward you, it also creates the opposite reaction in others. And this is where the dynamic often becomes confusing. One moment, you meet someone who feels instantly comfortable around you, and the next moment, another person seems guarded, distant, or strangely irritated without any clear reason. You may replay the interaction in your mind, trying to figure out what went wrong. But many times, nothing actually went wrong at all. The reaction has less to do with anything you said, and more to do with something your presence quietly reflects. Human beings have a natural tendency to compare themselves with the people around them. This comparison happens automatically, often without conscious awareness. People notice confidence, clarity, or integrity in someone else, and immediately begin measuring it against their own sense of identity. When the comparison feels positive, admiration follows. But when the comparison touches areas of insecurity, discomfort begins to grow. Authenticity has a way of revealing those hidden comparisons. When someone encounters a person who appears grounded in purpose, comfortable with honesty, and unafraid of being genuine, it can trigger questions they have been avoiding about themselves. Those questions may be simple but powerful. Am I being honest about who I am? Am I living according to my values, or am I only protecting my image? Am I moving toward growth, or am I staying where it feels safe? For individuals who are ready to confront those questions, the experience can become motivating. They may feel inspired to examine their own lives and pursue deeper self-awareness. But for others, the same reflection feels threatening. Instead of looking inward, they instinctively distance themselves from the person who triggered the uncomfortable realization. This reaction is not always conscious. Most people do not wake up in the morning planning to avoid someone who reflects their insecurities. The avoidance happens quietly, often disguised as indifference or subtle criticism. They may say that you seem intense, distant, or hard to read. Sometimes they describe you as intimidating, even though you have not displayed any aggressive behavior. What they are often reacting to is the mirror effect that authenticity creates. When someone lives with a clear sense of identity, it becomes difficult for people around them to ignore the differences between truth and appearance. The mirror does not accuse anyone. It simply reflects what is already there. Yet reflection can feel uncomfortable when someone is not ready to face what they see. This is one reason the chosen path often feels lonely at times. When you refuse to participate in manipulation, gossip, or superficial behavior, you quietly step outside the patterns that many social environments depend on. Some individuals admire that decision, but others feel exposed by it. They may interpret your behavior as judgment, even when you have not judged them at all. The discomfort comes from the awareness that your presence represents a different way of living. Scripture describes this tension through the metaphor of light and darkness. In the Gospel of John, it explains that light has come into the world, but people sometimes prefer darkness because their actions are hidden there. The passage does not suggest that everyone intentionally rejects truth. Instead, it acknowledges a simple human reality. Light reveals what is hidden, and not everyone is ready for that revelation. When someone carries clarity in their character, that clarity functions like light. It exposes what others might prefer to keep private, including doubts, contradictions, and unresolved struggles. As a result, the reaction can feel surprisingly strong, even when the interaction itself was ordinary. You might enter a room quietly, speak respectfully, and still sense that certain individuals seem uneasy around you. Their discomfort does not necessarily mean you did anything wrong. It may simply mean that your presence activated a reflection they were not expecting. The chosen one often becomes a mirror without intending to be one. Authentic living makes it harder for people to hide behind carefully constructed identities. And when those identities feel threatened, distance becomes the easiest solution. Over time, you begin to notice patterns in how people respond. Those who are open to growth tend to lean into the reflection. They may ask questions, seek advice, or simply appreciate the honesty they see in you. Others choose avoidance, because stepping closer would require confronting parts of themselves they are not prepared to examine. This divide can feel frustrating at first. Many people who carry authenticity genuinely want to get along with everyone. They try to soften their presence, explain themselves more clearly, or make extra efforts to reassure others. But eventually, a realization begins to form. Not every reaction is yours to control. Some people are ready for reflection, and some people are not. The mirror effect simply reveals where each person stands in their own journey. Once you understand this, the dynamic becomes easier to accept. You stop interpreting every uncomfortable reaction as a personal failure. Instead, you recognize that authenticity naturally reveals truth, and truth does not always produce comfortable responses. Sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is allow people the space to respond however they choose. The mirror remains what it is, whether someone chooses to look into it or walk past it. As you continue moving through life and observing how people react to you, a deeper pattern slowly becomes visible. The divide between those who feel drawn to you and those who keep their distance often has less to do with personality and much more to do with direction. People tend to fall into two quiet categories when it comes to their inner life. Some are moving toward growth, even if that growth feels uncomfortable. Others are trying to protect their comfort, even if that comfort keeps them from changing. This difference is rarely discussed openly, yet it shapes countless interactions in everyday life. Individuals pursuing growth tend to appreciate environments that challenge them. They value conversations that reveal truth, rather than conversations that simply reinforce what they already believe. When they encounter someone who carries awareness, honesty, and purpose, they recognize it as an opportunity rather than a threat. Instead of feeling defensive, they feel curious. Your presence may prompt them to reflect on their habits, their beliefs, or the direction their life is taking. That reflection does not feel like pressure to them. It feels like an invitation to evolve. These individuals understand something important about personal development. Growth rarely happens inside perfect comfort. It often begins the moment someone is willing to face difficult truths. When people who are open to change encounter someone who lives with clarity, they sense that clarity as a guide rather than a judgment. Your perspective may introduce ideas they had not considered before, and rather than resisting them, they explore them. The interaction becomes energizing because both sides are participating in something meaningful. Conversations carry depth. Silence feels comfortable rather than awkward. Over time, these individuals become companions on a similar journey. They are not necessarily identical in personality or background, but they share a willingness to evolve. Being around them feels constructive because both sides are growing in different ways. Yet, the same presence that encourages growth in some people creates tension for others. For individuals whose primary goal is comfort, reflection often feels like disruption. Comfort relies on familiarity. It prefers predictable routines, stable beliefs, and social environments where nothing challenges the current order. When a person enters that environment, carrying awareness or perspective that invites change, the reaction can be defensive. It may appear subtle at first. Conversations become shorter. Eye contact fades more quickly. The person may avoid topics that once seemed harmless. Sometimes, they interpret your presence as criticism, even when you have offered none. This reaction happens because growth introduces uncertainty. To grow requires acknowledging that something about the present version of life may not be complete. That realization can feel threatening to someone who's trying to preserve stability. Instead of facing that possibility, many people instinctively retreat into environments that reinforce their current identity. Your presence becomes uncomfortable, not because you are forcing change, but because you represent the possibility of it. The divide between growth and comfort has existed throughout history. In the spiritual sense, it appears whenever truth invites transformation. Scripture often describes this tension as the process of renewing the mind. The letter to the Romans speaks about transformation through the renewal of one's thinking, encouraging believers not to conform to the patterns of the world, but to be changed from within. That message has always produced two different reactions. Those who desire transformation welcome it with openness. Those who prefer familiarity resist it because it disrupts the structure they rely on. When you begin to see this pattern clearly, the reactions people have toward you start making more sense. The individuals who feel energized around you are often those who are already seeking growth in their own lives. They recognize something in your perspective that aligns with their own desire to move forward. Even when conversations challenge them, they appreciate the experience because it pushes them toward clarity. For them, your presence feels constructive. It adds momentum to the direction they already want to travel. On the other hand, people who are protecting their comfort may interpret the same presence very differently. Without realizing it, they may view you as a source of pressure or instability. Your perspective reminds them that change is possible, and that reminder feels unsettling. Rather than examining their own resistance, they often step away from the interaction altogether. This divide explains why relationships sometimes shift as you grow. Certain connections become stronger because both people are evolving in compatible directions. Other relationships slowly fade because the paths no longer align. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it happens quietly through distance, fewer conversations, or a gradual reduction in shared interests. For a long time, this process can feel disappointing. Many people naturally hope that everyone in their life will move forward together. Yet, growth rarely unfolds in perfectly synchronized ways. Each person responds to change according to their own readiness. Some embrace it quickly, others resist it for years, and some avoid it entirely. Understanding this difference can bring a surprising sense of peace. You begin to realize that the divide between love and avoidance is not random. It often reflects the deeper question of whether someone is seeking transformation or preserving comfort. Your role is not to force anyone into growth. Your responsibility is simply to remain consistent in your own direction. When you continue walking with clarity, the people who are ready for that journey naturally appear beside you. Those who are not ready often drift away, not because of hostility, but because the paths have separated. Over time, this process shapes a circle of relationships built on shared movement rather than convenience. These connections tend to be fewer in number, but they carry greater depth. The conversations become richer, the trust becomes stronger. Everyone involved recognizes that growth is not always easy, but it is worth the effort. In that environment, authenticity no longer creates confusion. It becomes the foundation for genuine connection. At some point in your journey, a realization quietly settles into your mind that changes the way you see people's reactions forever. For years, you may have tried to understand every response you received. When someone liked you, you wondered what you did right. When someone seemed distant or uncomfortable, you searched for mistakes you might have made. You replayed conversations in your mind, examined your words, and tried to adjust your behavior so that everyone around you would feel comfortable. That instinct is natural. Most people are taught from a young age that harmony means keeping everyone pleased. But the chosen path slowly reveals a truth that many people resist for most of their lives. Universal approval is not only unrealistic, it is unnecessary. The moment you begin living with authenticity and purpose, reactions naturally divide. Some people resonate with what they see, and others quietly move away from it. Trying to control that process often leads to something more damaging than rejection. It leads to the gradual loss of your own identity. When someone spends too much time adjusting themselves to meet everyone else's expectations, they slowly begin to forget who they actually are. Their decisions become guided by fear of disapproval rather than clarity of purpose. Conversations become filtered through the question of what others will think instead of what is true. Over time, this constant adjustment creates exhaustion because maintaining a version of yourself designed to satisfy every personality is impossible. The chosen one eventually recognizes that authenticity cannot survive under the weight of constant approval seeking. Living honestly requires accepting that some people will misunderstand you, some will disagree with you, and some will simply choose not to remain close. That realization may feel uncomfortable at first, but it also carries a surprising sense of freedom. Once you stop trying to manage everyone's reactions, your energy shifts towards something far more meaningful. Instead of monitoring every interaction, you begin focusing on the consistency of your character. You ask a different set of questions. Am I living according to the values I believe are right? Am I treating people with integrity and respect? Am I moving toward the purpose I feel called to pursue? These questions center your attention on the things you can actually control. Other people's reactions remain outside that circle. They belong to each person's own perspective, experiences, and readiness to engage with truth. As you grow more comfortable with this understanding, the divide that once felt confusing begins to feel natural. The people who resonate with your values remain in your life because the connection is real. They appreciate honesty, growth, and clarity, just as you do. Conversations with them feel constructive because both sides share a similar direction. These relationships often grow deeper over time because they are built on authenticity rather than convenience. At the same time, some individuals gradually move away. The distance may appear through subtle changes in communication or through an unspoken understanding that the connection no longer fits where both lives are heading. When you stop trying to force those relationships to remain exactly as they were, the separation becomes easier to accept. Distance does not always mean hostility. Often it simply means that two people are walking different paths. Healthy boundaries begin to form naturally once you accept that not every relationship is meant to last forever in the same form. The chosen one learns to appreciate the people who walk beside them without feeling responsible for those who decide to walk elsewhere. This shift also strengthens your sense of purpose. When approval is no longer the central goal, clarity becomes easier to maintain. Decisions are guided by values rather than popularity. Actions become more deliberate because they are rooted in conviction rather than reaction. In many ways, this stage represents a quiet turning point in personal growth. Instead of trying to shape your identity according to the expectations of others, you begin living according to the direction God has placed within your heart. Scripture speaks clearly about this principle. In the letter to the Galatians, Paul asks a simple but powerful question about whether a person is seeking the approval of people or the approval of God. He explains that trying to serve both at the same time is impossible because the pursuit of universal approval eventually compromises truth. Faithfulness to purpose often requires the courage to stand apart from expectations that conflict with that purpose. For the chosen one, this lesson becomes practical rather than theoretical. Each day presents moments where honesty, integrity, or conviction may not align with what others expect. Choosing authenticity in those moments may create temporary discomfort, but it also preserves the clarity of your path. Over time, the people who belong in your life recognize that consistency. They see that your character does not shift according to pressure or convenience. That reliability builds trust in a way that popularity never could. Eventually, you realize that the reactions people have toward you reveal something about them rather than defining something about you. Those who value truth will feel comfortable around it. Those who prefer illusion may step away from it. Both responses are part of the natural order of human relationships. Your responsibility is not to manage that order. Your responsibility is to continue walking the path with honesty, humility, and purpose. When you accept that truth fully, something interesting happens. The anxiety that once accompanied other people's opinions begins to fade. Instead of constantly evaluating whether you are liked or avoided, you simply focus on living faithfully. The right relationships remain because they are built on alignment rather than approval. The wrong ones fade because they were never meant to carry you into the next chapter. In the end, the divide that once confused you becomes one of the clearest signs that you are walking the path you were meant to follow. Some people will appreciate the clarity you carry. Others will prefer distance from it. Both reactions are natural. Neither one determines who you are meant to become. So, if you've ever wondered why people seem to react so strongly to you, remember this simple truth. Your presence reveals things. Some people recognize honesty and feel drawn to it. Others sense the same clarity and choose distance. Both reactions are natural, and neither one should make you question your path. The important thing is to keep walking in the purpose God placed inside you. If this message spoke to your journey today, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more messages that strengthen your faith and direction.